Hello, my name is Vanessa Cruz, pronouns she, her, ella. I currently reside in the unceded lands of the Tongva Quiche lands, colonially known as Los Angeles, California. My image description, I am a Mexican American woman. I currently have my dark hair down. I have caramel skin. I'm wearing some light makeup with some super fun glasses, beaded red earrings. I'm wearing a long sleeve black shirt, and I'm in front of a white wall with some blinds. I am a disabled dance artist, choreographer, a dance filmmaker. I also do a lot of writing, and I am also a disability justice activist. I do a lot of my work, activism work through DANC, Dance Artists National Collective. Some of my consulting work I do, I'm currently with Home LA, based in LA, California, where they do site-specific work. And I'm currently helping them manage how they can make all these different performances that they do in various locations more accessible. And additionally, I also do a series of workshops that I have been cultivating. Two of them are called Dismantling Ableism in Dance, and the other one is called Accessibility at the Forefront of Dance Making, focusing on dance films, doing audio description and captioning. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Beth.
Thanks, Vanessa. Hi, all. My name is Beth Prevor. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white, mature, disabled woman with short gray hair, wearing a kind of blue striped shirt, sitting in my home office with a blurred background. I'm the executive director of Hands-On Sign Interpreted Performances. We do sign interpreted performances primarily in New York City, where I live. I'm also an accessibility consultant with several different organizations, the Alliance of Resident Theaters of New York, the New Jersey Theater Alliance. I'm on a steering committee of the Museum Arts and Cultural Access Consortium, which is a group of New York City cultural organizations. I'm a member of Culture 3, which again is another group of cultural organizations in New York, and I'm the co-chair of their Disability Justice and Accessibility Working Group. And I'm a retired administrator at the New York City Department of Education, where I was the director of Sign Language Interpreting Services. That's me.
Yeah, so budgeting for accessibility is something I have been interested in for a while, given a lot of my activism work is navigating how we can call in organizations in helping to make their venues more accessible, their dance spaces more accessible, and what that looks like. So for me, I feel like one of the main things is planning for accessibility at the very beginning of any project, any dance work, anything that requires planning ahead of time. It's never too late to start, but it's always a good start to have it at the very beginning of any planning that you're doing. And so what it really means is striving to making sure that we are catering to our communities that haven't had the chance to be in the spaces that you have. And so a lot of disabled folks don't usually have access to the arts because of various reasons. And one of the reasons is because of inaccessibility. And so oftentimes we hear like, oh, we don't have the budget to make our spaces accessible. Well, the thing is, like, it needs to be planned ahead of time. It needs to be at the very front of like when you're doing your fiscal budgeting and all of that. Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask you, Beth, like, what does accessibility and budgeting mean to you?
Well, I wrote down intentional planning. So I think we're kind of both on the same track with planning. I think that's the number one point that you have to make in terms of budgeting for accessibility. I mean, I work with sign language interpreters, and from the get-go, sign language interpreters are an expensive accommodation. And it's something that nobody really wants to talk about a lot, because we cost a lot of money. And so the planning element of it is just, it's so important to plan. But the other thing I want to bring up, only because I mean, this kind of workshop came together like really fortuitous for me, because I've really been thinking a lot about this idea about budgeting, because we work with organizations that have to raise the money to do an interpretive performance. There's so many elements of doing a good job versus doing a less good job. I don't want to say a bad job, but doing a less good job. And a lot of that has to do with not only the planning element of it, but the information part that people don't do. They don't know. They don't know what things cost. They're coming in kind of after the fact. They're thinking about accessibility after, rather than, this whole idea of planning is so important in every aspect of this conversation, because the tendency, especially in what we do, always seems to be after the fact. It always seems to be something that somebody thought about while they're doing a show and go, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we did this? They have no idea how much it costs. They have no idea whether they have the money or they don't have the money, and they have to go try to find the money. And so it's always this kind of backtracking, and it's not part of their initial concept. It's not done when they do their budget for the year, or it's not done so much in advance. It's always done after. And that's if one thing can come out of this conversation, because we both just said it, and is that you have to plan. You can't, and we don't want to be an afterthought. That's the other part too, is that to do it as an afterthought also doesn't feel good from how you're doing it. It's like, well, why didn't you think about this before? Or when you were planning your budget and planning your programs, why didn't this get part of your plans? So planning.
Yeah, this is Vanessa speaking. I kind of want to add on to that. I think while we say planning, I do want to bring into the conversation of like quality versus quantity, of like what happens in the planning phase has to very much do with like understanding what ASL looks like, understanding what audio description looks like, understanding what closed captioning, open captioning, all of that looks like, to ensure that disabled folks are getting the quality of any performance or event that a non-disabled person will get. And so I think that's so important to think about, which I want to reel in this aspect of disability justice, and like how understanding that framework can really help understand help the organization understand why it's important to plan ahead, right? It's one thing like, yes, plan ahead, but why are we planning ahead? And understanding that the different marginalizations and oppressions that happen in our communities, understanding that and really putting that at the forefront is so important. Yeah, and that.
Well, and I think too, this idea of understanding it, I think there has to be like an acknowledgement sometimes on our end that, well, I mean, the field that I work in is very specific to the field. And I don't make the assumption that people who are not in my field know what my field is, or should know what my field is, but they have to ask. And again, I think this whole idea of understanding and researching and really kind of listening to other people and listening to people who know more about this than they do, is also a really, it's a part of inclusion that I think is just a really important aspect of it, is that we want to be included in the conversations and the questions, and to at least be acknowledged, to just go, we know what we're talking about. So if we're talking about interpreters, we know what a good interpreter is. We know what a quality interpreter is, to bring a quality performance of your piece of art. So it's got to be a joint conversation, not just you've raised the money and you're going to do it and you have no idea how to do it, but include us in the conversation to work with you to make something beautiful and work well and be inclusive to the community that you want to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. This kind of brings up this thing I was thinking about, and I feel like some organizations have been doing it, is hiring an accessibility consultant and putting that in your budget. Because I think people get overwhelmed with the amount of accessibility, how much energy is put into accessibility. And I feel like working with a consultant allows that consultant to cater to what your organization is. If there's a small organization, they can cater to what your budget is. And like how, it's like baby steps, right? We can't expect every organization, especially the smaller ones that don't have a big budget, to include everything, but at least there is an effort to get towards that end goal. For the bigger organizations, yes, absolutely hire accessibility consultant and really do everything in your power to make sure that your events or performances are accessible. And that.
The other thing that I've been thinking about, and again, because I've been thinking about this idea of budgets, like before this conversation, I thought it would be really interesting to bring it up. Because the thing that I've been thinking about is that there really is no, well, I don't want to say this here, but I mean, it's not that there's not a lot of money for access sometimes, that there's not a place, because I think, part of the questions in this conversation was, what are the resources? Where should we tell people to go to look for money? And, I thought about that. It's like, I don't really know. And to be completely honest about that, I can't say, oh, you should go to ABC Foundation or ABC, they do access. I think it's a research project about how you look for funding for accessibility. I think sometimes too, this conversation about planning is that sometimes it just becomes a general part of your budget. It's not necessarily looking for specific money for assigned interpretive performance, but it's part of your overall plan. And that plan is there because you value inclusion, and that's part of your mission and part of your organization. But the thing that I've been thinking about, and I would love to hear your thoughts about this, Vanessa, only because we're having this conversation, is, I think that there should be a pot of money somewhere. I think all these foundations, all these big foundations should kick in big bucks and put this pot of money there for organizations to use for access issues. And I think specifically because what we're seeing in our field is there's a lot of deaf artists out there getting a lot of work, which is fantastic. But if a deaf artist goes into an audition, not for a deaf role, just to audition for a play, and people go, oh, wow, they were great. Let's cast that person. Suddenly that person costs money. Whereas no other performer costs money. If you have a group of actors, they don't cost additional money, but a deaf or disabled person is going to cost money. And so where do we get this idea that people are not being hired or being hired because they cost money? And so we have to figure out a way to take money out of the equation so that money doesn't become the issue. And I'm only kind of bringing this up because this is what I've been thinking about lately. And I don't know how to do it except to go to the big foundations of the country and let everybody put this pot of money together for access issues, because maybe if we take money out of the equation, we level the playing field a little bit more for everybody, so that it's not like somebody is coming into audition and saying, can I hire this person or not hire this person because of the access needs? of this person. So I'm just kind of throwing that out only because I don't know how to do this yet, but I think that we as an arts community have to start kind of bringing this to the forefront of foundations, because we ask people to be accessible, but we don't give them the finances to be able to do it. And I think somehow we have to figure that out.
Yeah, this is Vanessa speaking. That's a big question and a very important question, right? As someone who has been navigating auditioning for different dance gigs or even choreographic work, I think one of the ways I work for Dance Artist National Collective, we have put in place like these audition guidelines, and one of them is asking the choreographer to find a location where it's actually accessible. So it's not necessarily that if you hire a disabled person is quote unquote expensive. It's finding the venues ahead of time. It's finding these things ahead of time, right? I think if we navigate our own resources, we have Zoom now. A lot, the accounts are free from most of them, right? Most of the accounts that they have listed on their plans. We have internet, we have technology. Can we Zoom in an ASL interpreter for this audition? What does that look like? Can we host auditions via Zoom? I've seen certain dance companies offer that. It'll be amazing if more dance companies do that option. I feel like, yes, we need more money, but also I feel like we can still utilize resources that we do have at our disposal to implement access. And I've done that in a way and through my accessibility at the forefront of dance making workshop, where I'm talking to individual dance artists about their dance films. So they're not necessarily disabled. And I tell them like, look, we can actually make our dance films accessible by creating audio description. I've created a template, like this is how you can develop your own audio description. I acknowledge that it's labor. I think that's something to absolutely acknowledge, right? If you're doing your own access for your work, it is labor, and that's something to keep in mind as you grow as an artist. But yeah, I just feel like I personally don't know any foundations or catering to just giving money to organizations for access. Although I do feel like here in the West, in LA, California specifically, I have seen some grants for organizations for access, which I think is really exciting, which is why I was onboarded for Home LA. It was thanks to that grant that they received. Yeah, so I feel like there's different ways in viewing access, and it's never going to look one way. I think that's important to think about. There is no shortcuts. It's not a checklist. It varies.
And it's not a one size fits all. I mean, that's the other,
Exactly.
it's disability is not, homogeneous. It's not, so it's not, it's not like if you do it for one, you're kind of covered for everybody. So that's the other thing. And again, I think everything that you're saying too goes back to this idea of planning and information seeking, which I think are the two aspects of this, about how you do anything, about how you do, whether it's audio description or sign language interpreting or looking for accessible spaces or using, situations like Zoom or using different technologies that we've kind of found during the pandemic to say, you can adjust certain things, and how else can we do it? Kind of working with the disabled performer, and getting feedback about, other options that are available. I mean, I just think, again, and I'm being very specific to the area that I work with, which is just an expensive area. And it just gets really, also where I'm trying to like look at like the arc of, especially like a performer, like what's involved in a deaf or disabled artist from beginning to end, and in terms of the accommodations, and really being thoughtful and intentional about, just because somebody gets in the room for a reading, that's just the beginning of the process, and the process goes through till closing night. And how do we really not give the short shrift to a person and just say, well, I can give you an accommodation for this aspect of it, but there's, the arts are, there's A to Z, and you really, when somebody is in, you don't want to say, well, you can get in, but you can't really get to, part two. You can only get here. So really what's involved. And so I think it's probably this combination of planning and really thinking through things, which is planning. So, I mean, I think planning is just, it is just so important about like everything. So the planning the budget and really understanding in advance everything that's involved is the other part of this too. Because again, if you plan for the part A of an artist's work, you really don't want to not give them full access to the whole situation, the whole situation or the whole experience. So you have to plan through till the end. And it's, yeah, I mean, that to me is the most important thing, and the planning includes whatever research you need to do to look for the resources, to look for, the service providers in that, in that area, that field that you need to find. And again, going back to interpreting, people don't know how to find interpreters. People don't know what a good interpreter is versus a not good interpreter. So there's so many things that if we work together early on, rather than after the fact, that would be so much better for everybody.
Yeah, this is Vanessa speaking. Yeah, this kind of reminds me of an initiative I started at my university in 2020, 2021 pandemic. You know, we did a virtual show for the first time, which is really exciting. I was part of the committee, and I decided to do a disability accessibility committee. And so from the very beginning, I led the department to not only plan ahead, but also implement access needs. And so I developed the audio description template for them. I also helped bridge their ASL department with them to incorporate them for their virtual show. And it was a really, it was a stressful time. I will say it was very stressful. But it was really exciting to see it all come together. And the quality in which we did it was really amazing. And for me, that really gave me hope that there is a way to really make things accessible that looks like art. I think it's just so beautiful. And that's what happens when you plan ahead of time. And I really am excited that, there's organizations that are beginning to do that. And we need more now. Yeah, I just wanted to share that because I feel like it's just so relevant to this aspect of budgeting for accessibility. Yeah.
And this is Beth. I totally agree with everything that you're saying. And I also think too is people don't do more than you can do to start with. That's another thing is, I mean, if you're looking at budgeting and you're looking at your budget and what you can do what you can do. And I think that's another part of the whole budget planning part is don't try to do everything all at once and not do a good job. Do what you can do with the budget that you have, but do a really good job. And that will be so much better than just trying to do more than you actually can do. So really be, again, I think an intentional and again, part of the planning process, do as much as you can do. And I think, another point too is, work with the disability community. on, on getting into the community, getting advice from, getting resources from, getting, that information from the community also, I think, is incredibly helpful, whether it's going out for a budget or not. But I think just in terms of learning what the needs are of the community and where to get the resources from the community, that will at least put whatever money and budget you have to the best use, rather than kind of just having money and just not working with the community to get the right advice.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. Yeah. Um, for a lot of my own personal learnings, I have learned from Alice Wong. I have learned from Kinetic Light, Alice Shepherd, um, Kayla Hamilton. I've learned from um, various other amazing, badass, disabled artists in the field that are also doing this kind of work. And it's just so important to really hone in on the community. We know so much, and we're always happy to help. Um, just
And
to
we're
make
always
sure
happy
that
to
you're,
share. And we're always happy to share. I mean, that just in kind of
yeah,
like continuing what you're saying is that it's not, it's not only to learn the things, but I think the resources and the sharing of the information within the disability community is very open. So I think that if you have questions, if you ask somebody in your community with a disability, if they don't know it, they probably know other people. I mean, you just kind of like ticked off like 5 people that are going like, I know Alice, I know, I mean,
yeah,
and if I don't know it, now I can contact you and say, Vanessa, can you reach out to this? I mean, I think that people are so kind of interconnected that it's would be such a great help to organizations that you're not doing this on your own, and that we want to work with you. We want to make your organizations and help you make your organizations more accessible. So just ask.
yeah. Some last thoughts. We've done all this planning. Let's say we've done all this planning. We're in it. We're doing it. We're in the thick of it. The number one thing to remember is advertise. Please advertise that you have ASL, AD, accessible venues. I have seen some orgs do the work, but then when they start advertising, it's nowhere in their flyer, their Instagram caption. You have to go dig it up. It's just extra labor for a disabled person who wants to go see your event. So please advertise that you have all these amazing accessibility components for your program. Yeah, I'm really happy that we had this conversation, Beth. This is so important. There's just so much more to talk about. So yeah, Beth, if you have any last words, and yeah,
No,
thank you all for being here.
I think that was a great wrap up. And the old adage, if you build it, they will come. No, I mean, you really have to let people know, and you have to reach out to the communities. And I will also say that with talking about budgets and how potentially costly certain services are, you don't want to do it for nobody. You really want to work with the communities, and you have to reach out. And that's the part of this that you never want to do, like, especially an accessible service that needs an audio describer or a sign language interpreter or a caption operator. You don't want to do it for nobody. You really want to because the community, they need to know. So you need to kind of look at this community as a new community that you want to invite into your spaces. And you have to do the work just like you would do with any other new community that you want to bring into your organization, and go out to the community and let them know that you want to invite them in and welcome them in. And that's really important. With all this talk about, what things might cost, you don't want to do it for nobody. And it's got to be a relationship between you and the community. So I think that's a great ending to our conversation.
Thank you, everyone. We hope to see you soon.